You know, usually when we talk about simplifying our lives or like clearing out the clutter, there's this underlying expectation of structural organization.
Right. Like we immediately picture organizing a physical closet or maybe a garage.
Exactly. You go to the store, you buy a bunch of those matching plastic bins, you ruthlessly sort your sweaters by color,
Yeah.
and then you toss out a few pairs of old shoes and boom, you step back, you point at the closet, and you can definitively say, there it is. My life is simple.
It's entirely visible. I mean, it's a binary state. Your closet is either cluttered or it's uncluttered.
Right.
And that tangible result is incredibly comforting to us. We are just hardwired to like things categorized neatly in physical space.
But the moment you apply that exact same logic to the world of your own mind, the entire system just breaks down.
Oh, totally.
You step into your psychological landscape, and suddenly those neat little plastic bins are completely useless.
Oh.
We aren't dealing with sweaters and shoes anymore. We're looking at a mental landscape that is messy, unpredictable, and honestly, pretty murky.
It is the absolute definition of mental muddy waters.
Okay.
You can't just take a lingering resentment, put it into a plastic bin, and expect it to disappear.
You really can't, and navigating those muddy waters is our mission today, so welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
We're taking you on a journey through a truly fascinating collection of philosophical and psychological writings by Payson Intawong. In a world defined by absolute information overload, endless digital notifications, constant mental chatter, we are extracting Payson's blueprint for finding true, sustainable simplicity.
And let's be clear right up front. This isn't just a collection of, like, think positive platitudes.
No, definitely not.
Or, a guide to buying a better daily planner. What we are actually looking at is a profound, almost surgical breakdown of why we suffer.
Yeah.
It explores the specific mechanisms our own minds use to actively trick us, and the intensely practical steps we can take to rewire our perception of reality.
I have to admit, diving into these sources completely upended my fundamental understanding of what a word like happiness actually means. It forced a massive perspective shift.
It really challenges those core assumptions.
It does. But before we can get to any kind of lasting peace, we have to look at how we are currently handling the baseline chaos of daily life. Okay, let's unpack this. Payson introduces a very rigid, practical framework for categorizing the problems we face every day.
Right. He divides them into 3 distinct buckets.
Exactly. Bucket 1, problems you can solve immediately. Bucket 2, problems you can only solve partially over time. And bucket 3, problems you cannot solve at all.
And what's fascinating here is how often, and honestly, how disastrously, we miscategorize our problems.
Oh, we are terrible at it.
We really are. We're specifically terrible at identifying that third bucket. We treat unsolvable problems as if they just need, like, a little more effort.
Just push a bit harder.
Yeah, exactly. And Payson uses this visceral, striking analogy in the text to illustrate the danger of doing this. He says, imagine you are lost deep in a dense, unforgiving forest with a traveling companion.
Okay.
Suddenly, tragically, your companion dies. Now, the logical, functional thing to do would be to accept this painful reality, bury your friend, grieve, and focus every ounce of your remaining energy on finding your way out of the woods.
Yeah, that's what survival requires.
But instead, because you completely refuse to accept the truth of an unsolvable problem, you insist on picking up their corpse and carrying it with you.
That is an incredibly dark image.
Yeah.
But it paints such a vivid picture of what we are doing internally.
Think about the actual physics and biology of that decision. Day after day, you're hiking through this dense forest, and over time, that corpse begins to rot.
Right.
The emotional toll is massive, obviously, but the physical weight is what exhausts you. You are burning the vital energy you desperately need to survive. The smell, the flies, the sheer burden of it slows you down to a crawl. And eventually, because you stubbornly refuse to let go of what could not be saved, you collapse.
So there aren't just one, but 2 corpses in the forest.
Exactly. You have actively destroyed yourself by trying to fix the unfixable.
It makes complete sense when you visualize it like that, but it begs the obvious question for anyone listening: why do we do that? Why do we insist on carrying the corpse of a failed relationship or like a missed career opportunity or a past mistake?
Well, Payson points to 4 specific psychological biases that basically short-circuit our logic. They are the core reasons we shoulder that dead weight. These are hate, ignorance, fear, and love.
Okay, let's break those down.
Sure. So hate blinds us by actively exaggerating the flaws in a situation, making us fight phantom enemies that don't actually matter.
Right, we get obsessed with the conflict.
Exactly. Then there's ignorance, which is when we just act blindly without gathering the facts. We just stumble through the woods hoping for the best.
Ignorance is bliss until you trip over a root.
Yeah, pretty much. Then fear is deeply rooted in biological self-preservation. We worry so much about losing whatever perceived benefits or comforts we currently have that we literally paralyze ourselves.
And the fourth one?
The fourth is love, which blinds us to the fatal flaws of a situation or a person.
Okay, I actually want to push back on that last one, or at least reframe it for a modern context.
Go for it.
Because culturally, we view love as this ultimate, unassailable virtue, like love conquers all.
Right.
But in the context of the unsolvable problem, it's like being a venture capitalist evaluating your very own startup.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. You are so unconditionally in love with your own idea, so deeply attached to the original vision you had 5 years ago, that you keep pouring funding into a sinking ship.
You ignore the data.
Completely. You ignore the terrible quarterly financial reports. You ignore the entire market screaming no at you. Love, ironically, becomes the absolute enemy of growth because it prevents you from cutting your losses and walking away.
That venture capitalist analogy perfectly translates the concept. You end up carrying the corporate corpse.
Yeah, you burn your entire portfolio trying to save one doomed company.
And the underlying reason we are so wildly susceptible to these four biases, this persistent inability to accept reality as it is, it comes from a much deeper place in our psyche.
Where does it come from?
It comes from what Payson refers to as kilesa. This translates roughly to our deep-seated defilements or impurities or just our innate human desires.
So if we want to drop the corpse, we basically have to peel back the onion of desire to see what is actually driving us.
Exactly. And the sources break this kilesa down into four distinct levels, moving from the most obvious surface-level cravings down to desires that are so deeply hidden we don't even realize they exist.
Let's start with the surface level. Level 1.
Right. Level 1 is the coarse level. This is straightforward, sensual, and material desire.
Okay, the basics.
Yeah. These are craving for a perfectly cooked steak, a ridiculously comfortable bed, a luxury car, or just a massive bank account.
And Payson is clear that this isn't inherently evil, right? It's just basic.
Exactly. It's biological. The defining feature of level 1 is that it can actually be balanced relatively simply through basic morality, tangible charity, and giving.
Yeah.
It operates in the physical world, so it has natural limits.
That makes sense. You can look at your bank account, see a number, and say, okay, I can afford this car, I cannot afford that house. The math is real.
Right.
But then the layers get more complicated. We move to level 2, the medium level. This is the desire for honor, for praise, for social status and power.
And this is where it gets highly dangerous.
Why is that?
Because level 2 is entirely abstract, as you just pointed out. You can calculate the exact dollar amount needed to buy a house.
Yeah.
But you can never, under any circumstances, quantify enough praise.
Wow, yeah. There's no cap on it.
None. There is no metric, no dashboard, no spreadsheet that tells you when you have finally acquired enough honor or enough power to be satisfied.
It is a bottomless pit.
It really is.
Yeah.
You step onto a psychological treadmill that just keeps speeding up. And the fuel for that treadmill is entirely dependent on what other people think of you.
Which is terrifying when you pull back and look at how our entire modern society operates. Our economy, our social media ecosystems. They are essentially machines built entirely to harvest level 2 kilesa.
Completely.
Right.
We are addicted to likes, retweets, and views.
But then we peel the onion back again to level 3, the fine level. And this is defined as the desire for happiness and peace.
Yes.
And hold on, I am genuinely struggling to reconcile level 3. Payson is saying that the desire for happiness is actually a defilement.
That's what he's saying.
The entire multi-billion-dollar self-help industry is built on the pursuit of happiness. How does he justify that wanting to be happy is a problem?
This raises an important question, and it is arguably the most counterintuitive part of Payson's entire philosophy.
I mean, it goes against everything we're taught.
It does. But if we look at the mechanics of emotion, Payson's logic is flawless. He argues that happiness and suffering are actually two sides of the exact same coin.
How so?
Think about the mechanical, psychological energy required for both states. Suffering is the desperate, exhausting struggle to push an experience away from you.
Right, trying to escape it.
Exactly. And happiness is the desperate, exhausting struggle to pull an experience toward you and then grip it tightly so it doesn't leave.
Oh, I see the connection. They both require you to be entirely restless. Neither state allows you to just sit still.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Chasing happiness is inherently turbulent. You're constantly leaning out of the present moment, trying to grab something in the future.
Wow.
Therefore, the very desire for happiness is a defilement because it actively prevents true stillness.
So what's the alternative then?
Payson argues that true peace, a concept called Sati, has absolutely nothing to do with feeling happy. It is about pure, neutral acceptance.
Acceptance of what?
Of everything. Sati accepts profound joy and profound pain equally, without trying to aggressively cling to one or violently push the other away.
That is a massive paradigm shift. It completely changes the goalpost of human existence from, I want to feel good all the time, to, I want to accept whatever I am feeling right now.
Precisely. Which brings us to the core of the onion. Level 4, the deepest level of desire. The illusion of self or the ego.
The idea that there's a permanent me.
The grand illusion that there is a permanent, solid, unchanging you sitting somewhere behind your eyes, piloting your body.
Right.
Payson explains that what we call the self is really just a temporary gathering of physical elements, fleeting memories, and changing sensory input.
It's not real.
Not in the way we think. When you deeply realize that the self isn't permanent, the ego dissolves. And when the ego dissolves, the desires of the first 3 levels lose their anchor.
Because there's no one there to desire them.
Exactly. There is no central you left to aggressively need the praise or crave the wealth or even chase the happiness.
Okay, logically, the framework makes sense. We drop the corpses in the forest, we recognize our desires, we peel the onion all the way down to the illusion of our own ego.
Right.
But how do we actually execute this? I mean, you can't just sit on your couch, declare out loud, I have no ego, and expect to be liberated.
No, definitely not. It takes work.
And Payson doesn't leave us hanging. He outlines a very systematic training of the mind. Specifically, he talks about upgrading our mindfulness, which he calls sati.
It is a highly systematic training, and it requires profound, deliberate effort. Payson breaks sati down into 3 distinct levels of practice.
Let's go through them. Level 1.
Level 1 is essentially controlling your thoughts. This is your everyday, functional, operational awareness.
Like getting through the workday.
Exactly. It's the baseline mindfulness you use to focus on a complex spreadsheet at work, or the basic restraint you summon to stop yourself from screaming at someone when they abruptly cut you off in heavy traffic.
Right, it keeps you out of jail.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It is highly practical, it keeps you out of trouble, but it is entirely surface level.
And level 2 is where the actual rewiring begins. This is seeing your thoughts. This is where you learn to step outside of the emotion itself.
Yes. You are shifting your internal architecture from being the actor to being the observer.
So instead of being angry,
Instead of saying, I am angry, which fuses your core identity with a temporary chemical emotion, you say, I am observing anger arising.
you separate yourself from it.
Right. You notice the heat in your chest, the tension in your jaw. The moment you merely watch the anger, rather than becoming the anger, it loses its power.
Because the observer cannot be the thing it is observing.
Exactly. The emotion shrinks under the spotlight of your attention.
I love visualizing this like watching a terrifying horror movie.
Okay, how so?
So level 1 of sati is just covering your eyes with your hands so you don't get scared. You're just blocking the input. Level 2 is pulling your hands away, staring directly at the monster on the screen, but constantly whispering to yourself, I'm just sitting in a dark theater. That monster is just a projection of colored pixels on a flat screen. It cannot hurt me. You are actively observing the illusion.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the mechanics of it, which leads perfectly into level 3, which is called Mahasati or Mahapanya.
And what's that?
This is the state of being above thoughts. In your horror movie analogy, level 3 is the profound, shattering realization that the theater, the flat screen, the colored pixels, and even the audience member watching it do not actually exist.
Wow. The entire construct vanishes.
It becomes a continuous, unbroken flow of pure awareness. There is no longer an artificial division between an observer and an observed object.
There is just reality, exactly as it is.
Exactly. The ego completely dissolves into the present moment, leading to ultimate liberation.
But again, Payson doesn't just leave us floating up in the philosophical clouds. He gives very grounded, sweaty, physical steps to begin this training.
Very practical stuff.
He outlines 7 steps to a new life in the source material, and a few of the mechanisms behind these steps are just fascinating. First, he advocates waking up early to run 3 kilometers.
And the text makes clear this isn't just about cardiovascular health. It's about biology.
Right.
The heavy breathing, the rhythmic pounding of your feet on the pavement. It forces your scattered, anxious mind to violently synchronize with your physical body before your ego even has time to wake up and start worrying about the day.
That makes total sense. Get the body moving before the mind can start complaining.
Right. And he pairs that physical exertion with environmental control. The ruthless decluttering of your room.
Going back to the physical closet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By physically removing excess possessions, you aren't just cleaning. You are tangibly practicing non-attachment.
You're proving a point to yourself.
Yes. You are clearing physical space to manufacture mental space. You are literally starving the level 1 kilesa of material desire by proving to yourself how little you actually need to survive.
And my absolute favorite mechanism is his instruction to deliberately help exactly 1 person a day.
But there's a catch.
Right. The catch is you must do it specifically to dismantle your own ego. You don't do it to get a thank you. You don't post about it online. You don't look for a pat on the back.
I know that.
You do it as an undercover operation in selflessness.
That practice directly combats the isolation that the ego thrives on. The ego wants to be separate and superior. Anonymous giving connects you to the whole.
It's beautiful. But if we want to really stress test this egoless state, we have to look at the arena where it is challenged the most: human relationships.
The ultimate test.
It really is.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It is one thing to be totally mindful, observing your thoughts, breathing deeply in a perfectly decluttered room.
Sure.
It's a completely different universe of difficulty when your partner is annoyed with you for the 100th time about how you load the dishwasher.
The real world.
Right. How does all this high-level philosophy translate to the messy, irritating reality of living with other human beings?
Payson has a brilliantly simple yet incredibly piercing take on the anatomy of an argument.
I love this part.
He says that when someone looks at you and says, "Why don't you understand me?" what they are actually revealing without realizing it is that they do not understand you.
So what does this all mean for us? Let's bring this directly into your daily life. Think about your closest relationship right now. Are you treating that person like a magical Doraemon pocket? You know, like the cartoon pouch that should magically produce an endless, bottomless supply of perfect empathy and exact understanding tailored just for you?
Oh, right.
All while you stubbornly hold on to your own rigid logic. We all do it. We aggressively demand that they understand our reasons, but we entirely refuse to step back and view the world through their limitations and their history.
What Payson breaks down is that true understanding in a relationship has absolutely nothing to do with logic.
It defies logic.
Completely. It has nothing to do with fairness or meeting halfway or drawing up some invisible contract of equal responsibilities.
So what is it?
True understanding is about the pure, unconditional acceptance of a deeply flawed human being. It is knowing their specific, irritating flaws and accepting them anyway, without secretly harboring a plan for them to change.
Which is so hard to do. He applies this radical acceptance to parenting as well. He outlines 5 specific gifts that parents must give their children, and the sequential order of these gifts is absolutely critical.
Yes, the order is everything.
If you mess up the order, the system fails. Number 1 is love. But this is love entirely without comparison. You never say, "Why can't you get grades like your sister?" Or, "Look at how well behaved the neighbor's kids are."
Because comparison breeds the ego.
Exactly. Number 2 is morality. But morality that is actively modeled through your own daily actions, not just preached at them like a sterile lecture.
Kids have an absolute radar for hypocrisy.
They really do. The third gift is where it becomes agonizingly difficult for many parents. Freedom.
This is the toughest one.
You must give them the freedom to make their own choices, even when you know with absolute certainty that those choices are going to lead to failure or pain.
Because without the freedom to fail, they cannot possibly receive the 4th gift, which is wisdom.
Right.
Wisdom does not come from sitting safely in a classroom listening to theory. Wisdom is the scar tissue that forms only from experiencing the harsh consequences of life firsthand.
And the 5th and final gift. Only after love, morality, freedom, and wisdom are deeply established do you give them wealth.
Yes, because giving wealth before wisdom is a recipe for absolute disaster.
It's toxic.
It ties perfectly back to the levels of kilesa. If you hand over wealth, which is pure level 1 material desire, before a child has cultivated the mindfulness and the wisdom to handle it, their unformed ego will simply consume that wealth, demand more, and ultimately destroy them.
Wow. The sequential structure of these 5 gifts is essentially a roadmap for raising a human being who doesn't spend their entire adult life carrying emotional corpses through the forest.
It's preventative medicine for the soul.
We have covered some truly incredible ground today. We started by looking at the brutal physics of carrying the corpses of unsolvable problems. We peeled back the layers of our own desires and exposed the subtle, exhausting trap of endlessly chasing happiness instead of embracing neutral peace.
We learn the mechanics of upgrading our mindfulness.
Right, watching our emotions like a horror movie on a screen until we realize the theater itself is an illusion. And finally, we brought it all home, learning that true love requires the unconditional acceptance of the deeply flawed people we share our lives with.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, everything Payson writes about is ultimately about taking absolute control of your internal reality.
Yeah.
And there is one final, profound piece of advice he gives regarding the most vulnerable moments of your day, the minutes right before you fall asleep.
I found this fascinating.
Payson argues that what you do in those moments quite literally programs your reality for the next day. As you drift off, your conscious mind lowers its defenses. Whatever you are holding on to seeps directly, unfiltered, into your deep subconscious.
So what should we be doing? He recommends a specific routine of 3 thoughts to hold as the brain powers down, right?
Right. First, wholesome thoughts.
Yeah.
This means focusing on pure gratitude, not greedy desires for what you want to achieve tomorrow, but profound thankfulness for what simply is.
Okay, gratitude.
Second, peaceful thoughts. Actively letting go of the day's petty arguments and focusing purely on the quiet rhythm of your breath, cultivating an internal emptiness.
Letting it all go.
And third, total awareness. Actually feeling the physical elements of your body, the weight of your limbs sinking into the mattress, the temperature of the air in your skin. You ground yourself entirely in the physical present before you let go of consciousness.
It's the ultimate antidote to the ego. The choice of what you carry into the dark is entirely yours.
Exactly.
So I want to leave you with a final thought, a challenge to test everything we've talked about today. The next time someone deeply misunderstands you, or insults you, or cuts you off in traffic, before you react, I want you to pause and ask yourself, where do I actually physically feel this insult?
That's a great question.
Does it exist in my hand? Does it exist in my knee? You will find that the injury exists nowhere in the physical world. It only exists in the illusion of the self. Tonight, when your head hits the pillow, are you going to replay the anxieties of that illusion, or are you going to consciously program your mind for liberation? The choice is yours. We will see you on the next deep dive.